The world saw him as a genius, a rock star, a symbol of freedom. But what if the prince we all knew was just a carefully crafted illusion? What if the real prince was a man living on the edge of a different reality? A world of his own making filled with strange beliefs, bizarre rituals, and secrets so profound they threatened to consume him. His life was a performance, but the greatest act was the one he kept hidden, a shadow play where art, spirituality, and madness intertwined in a way no one could have ever imagined. This is not about the music, but about the secrets he kept hidden, the bizarre obsessions, the strange rules he imposed on his inner circle, the eerie moments that hinted a life lived on a different plane. The paradox of Prince began with his persona. On stage, he was a force of nature, a lightning bolt of charisma and raw sexuality. Yet offstage, he was reclusive, almost pathologically shy. His public appearances were rare, his interviews even rarer, and when he did speak, his words were often cryptic, laced with a spiritual vocabulary that hinted at a deeper, more complex belief system. This duality wasn't just a quirk, it was the foundation of his unseen world. He built Paisley Park not just as a studio, but as a fortress, a sanctuary, where he could live and create on his own terms, free from the prying eyes of the world he so brilliantly captivated. Within its walls, the rules were his and his alone. They were not for convenience or comfort, but were, as those who worked there have claimed, part of a larger spiritual practice. He believed in the power of energy, the purity of sound, and the importance of a clean, unadulterated creative space. This belief system manifested in rules that seemed bizarre to the outside world. No one was allowed to swear. Meat was strictly forbidden, not just for him, but for everyone on the property. Even the type of music played on the radio was controlled. It was a sterile, almost monastic environment designed to serve one purpose: to allow Prince to tap into a higher creative consciousness. But what if these were not just the eccentricities of a genius? What if they were rituals, a way for him to open a channel to a source of inspiration that transcended human understanding? Stories from his inner circle, often whispered and never confirmed, suggest that Prince was in constant communication with something else. They talk of moments when he would stop a recording session mid-song, claiming a presence in the room, or when he would write entire albums in a matter of days, almost as if the music was being dictated to him. Was he just exceptionally gifted? Or was he a vessel for something beyond our comprehension, a medium through which an unseen world communicated its art? The clues are scattered throughout his life. The symbols in his work, the numerology he dabbled in, his sudden and dramatic conversion to a new faith, and his constant search for a higher truth. He was a man obsessed with a secret knowledge, a hidden wisdom he believed was the source of his power. He saw music not just as entertainment, but as a spiritual tool, a way to heal, to enlighten, and to connect with the divine. The more he delved into this unseen world, the more he distanced himself from the one we inhabited, becoming a figure of myth and legend, even while he was still alive. His life was a slow retreat from the mundane, a journey into the spiritual and the bizarre, a story that the public has only ever seen glimpses of. And the most bizarre part of that story is the secret room, the one that held the final pieces of his puzzle.
Paisley Park was not a home. It was a fortress of creative discipline, a world unto itself where Prince was the sovereign ruler and his unique rules were the law. The most common story is that of his vegetarianism and his dislike of coffee and alcohol, which he banned from the premises. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. The truly bizarre rules were the ones that governed the very air inside his sanctuary, the ones that hinted at a man on a mission far more profound than just making music. Employees and visitors to Paisley Park had to adhere to a strict dress code: no denim, no jeans, no casual wear of any kind. This wasn't about fashion, it was about purity. Prince believed that denim, being a common and mundane fabric, carried negative energy. He wanted his creative space to be clean, unpolluted by the energies of the outside world. This same obsessive need for purity extended to the food. Not only was there no meat, but no one was allowed to have any form of sugar or refined carbs. He had a nutritionist on staff to enforce these rules and to ensure that every meal was part of a holistic, spiritual diet designed to keep him in a state of hyper-creativity. But the most famous and unsettling of all the rules was the silent room, a room at the very heart of the complex, unmarked and unassuming, where all conversation was strictly forbidden. Those who entered had to communicate through whispers, or more often, through a complex series of hand signals that Prince had created himself. This wasn't just a space for quiet contemplation, it was a place of spiritual and creative channeling. He believed that the human voice, with its vibrations and ego, could interfere with the transmission of musical ideas from the other side. He would sit for hours in the silent room, sometimes with a few trusted musicians, sometimes alone, waiting for the melodies and lyrics to come to him. The stories from these sessions are chilling. Musicians would speak of feeling a presence in the room, of hearing faint, ghost-like melodies that would materialize into a full song when they returned to the studio. Some have claimed that Prince would go into a trance-like state, his eyes closed, his body swaying, as if listening to an inner concert. He wasn't just composing, he was transcribing. He believed the music was not his, but a gift from a higher power, and he was merely the one chosen to bring it into the world. Beyond the silent room, there were other unwritten laws. There was a strict no-shoes policy inside Paisley Park, but not for hygienic reasons. He believed that going barefoot allowed him to connect with the energy of the earth and the building itself, grounding him and making him more receptive to creative forces. He would often ask people to remove their shoes before they even entered the main studio, regardless of their status.
The vault at Paisley Park is a legend unto itself. It's the stuff of urban legend, a mythical repository of an artist's genius, and the ultimate symbol of Prince's obsessive need for control and secrecy. The official story is that the vault contains thousands of unreleased songs, albums, and videos, a treasure trove that would take decades to fully explore. But the true story, the one whispered in hushed tones by those who were there, is far more bizarre. What if the vault was not just a place to store music, but a place to hide a truth he was terrified of revealing? Prince's secrecy went beyond the usual artist's desire for privacy. It was a profound, almost spiritual need to protect his creations from a world he believed was not ready for them. He would work on a song, an album, or even a video for years, only to lock it away, never to be heard. The song The Ballad of Dorothy Parker from his album Sign o' the Times is often cited as an example of his secrecy, where the lyrics, with their strange and nonsensical metaphors, were supposedly a direct reflection of a lucid dream he had. But what if the dreams and the songs he kept hidden were even stranger? What if they were prophecies? Rumors persist that some of these recordings in the vault are not just music, but coded messages. They're said to contain symbols and lyrical puzzles that only he could understand, hinting at a secret history of his life and his connection to the unseen world he inhabited. Some of his biographers and insiders have suggested that he was afraid of his own creations, afraid that if his most radical ideas were ever released, they would unleash a power he couldn't control. He was a man who lived in the shadows, not out of shyness, but out of a profound need to protect his creations from a world he believed was not ready for them. One of the most persistent legends is about a rumored unreleased album titled The Dawn. It's said to be a deeply personal and spiritual concept album, an operatic exploration of his religious beliefs and his supposed connection to a higher power. It's rumored to contain songs that are not just music, but soundscapes designed to induce a meditative or even a trance-like state in the listener. This wasn't an album for the masses, it was a spiritual tool, a blueprint for enlightenment. And he was terrified of what would happen if it fell into the wrong hands. He was afraid it would be used for evil, for greed, for purposes antithetical to the ones he intended. The physical nature of the vault itself is a mystery. It's said to be a multi-story, temperature-controlled, hermetically sealed space with multiple security systems and coded access only for Prince. But those who have been inside have told stories of its eerie atmosphere. They say it feels as if the music inside is alive, a living, breathing entity waiting for its moment to be heard. They talk about a palpable energy, a strange hum in the air, a sense of being watched. Was this just the paranoia of an eccentric genius, or was it the physical manifestation of his fear? The fear that the music, the secrets, the prophecies he had locked away would one day break free and reveal a truth that the world was not prepared to face. His life was a riddle, and the vault was the key, a final, unreadable page of his most secret diary.
The final act of Prince's life was a mystery in itself, a tragic and bizarre end to a life lived on his own terms. He was found unresponsive in an elevator at Paisley Park, a scene so surreal it felt like something from one of his own music videos. But what if it was not just a tragic accident? What if his final days were a final, desperate act of a man who knew his time was short? A final masterpiece of his own creation, a farewell symphony written in his final moments. The months leading up to his death were filled with strange and unsettling clues. He was reportedly ill, but continued to work tirelessly, even feverishly. He was seen at a local pharmacy, looking frail and withdrawn, and had canceled several shows. But in the midst of this physical decline, he was as creative as ever. He was in the studio constantly, often for days at a time, seemingly racing against an invisible clock. It was as if he knew his time was short and was racing to finish a final secret masterpiece. His final public appearances were filled with a strange, almost prophetic energy. At a small show in Minnesota, he appeared on stage with his keyboard, not to play, but to make a final, cryptic statement. He told the crowd, "Wait a few days before you waste any prayers," a line that has been endlessly dissected by fans and biographers alike. Was this a clue? A warning? A final cryptic farewell? The next day, his final public appearance, he went to a local store to buy something and was seen looking gaunt and weary. It was as if the weight of the world and his secrets were finally catching up to him. And then there was the bizarre rumor of his final phone call. Stories, never confirmed, have circulated for years that the night before his death, he made a phone call to a handful of close friends and family members. But it was not a normal conversation. He didn't talk about his health or his work. Instead, he would simply play a fragment of an unreleased song and then hang up without saying a word. This was not a goodbye. It was a final transmission, a last piece of music from the man who used songs to communicate his deepest thoughts. Was he trying to send them a final message, a final piece of the puzzle that was his life? The end itself was as mysterious as the life he led. He was found alone in an elevator at Paisley Park, a symbol of his isolation and his commitment to his art. But was his death an accident, or was it a final, bizarre act of a man who lived and died shrouded in mystery? The truth may be hidden somewhere in the thousands of pages of journals he kept, in the locked songs in his vault, or in the very walls of Paisley Park itself. His life was a riddle, and his death was the final, unsolvable clue. A question mark, left for a world that was always trying to understand him, but never quite could.